Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on the Baritone mod for Minecraft. Baritone is a pathfinding and automation mod that has a great many features and is extremely powerful. However, it's also a little dangerous for new users as it can be a little bit tricky to set up, and by default can do some unintended activities without really any intention from the user. So, what do I mean by it can be a little dangerous? Well, most mods, and in fact Minecraft itself, when you want to run a command versus typing in the chat box, if I were to say clear into the chat, nothing happens, because Minecraft interprets that as me just speaking into the chat. But if I were to use the slash and then clear, well, now it'll try and clear my inventory because it's recognized a Minecraft command. Baritone is somewhat unique, at least in my experience, in that it is, by default, watching the chat for all commands. You don't have to enter a slash or anything special to run a command, which means that it is possible to trigger a command without realizing it. For instance, if I were to type just farm into the chat, no special signifier, you'll notice that Baritone has now activated farming mode and has cleared all of my wheat and is in fact marching me off into the distance to go try to mine or to farm whatever that is over there. I don't want to do that, and you probably don't want to do this by accident either. So, if Baritone has started running, how do you stop it? Well, by default, the easiest method is just to say cancel. And it cancels your current operation, and you can go about doing whatever you want. But that's a little annoying, and in some cases can be pretty destructive, especially if it goes with you aren't paying attention. You can do some real damage before you get it to stop. So how do we get Baritone to stop just listening to the chat as a whole? Well, we can change some of Baritone's settings, and the first one we're going to change is chat control. Now, if we just type it, because it is currently listening to our chat, we can just type chat control false. And that is going to set that setting to false. Now, if I go ahead and type farm in the chat, you'll notice nothing happens. Because Baritone's no longer paying attention to just the chat itself. You have to use its signifier, just like you'd have to use slash for a default Minecraft command. Well, what is Baritone's signifier? Well, it's this little hashtag here. If I type chat control with that symbol, and I type it false again, you'll notice it repeats the command, because it's now recognized that I've tried to change a setting or run a command. Similarly, if I type farm with the hashtag, it will go ahead and start farming all over again. Something to be aware of is now, if I try to type cancel, it won't work, because I have to type cancel with the command signifier in order to get it to work. But it does mean that you won't accidentally trigger a command. That's important. Now, you've probably have noticed in the couple of times where Baritone has taken over my character and started to walk me away, it didn't force me to turn around in the direction that I wanted to go. This is due to some other options that Baritone has by default. The first of which being the free look setting, which is set to set to true. If I change that to false, and remember we have to use the signifier, it'll set that value to false from true, which it was. Now, if I type in farm, you'll notice that I'm facing along the line I'm running, and I can't really look away. This is something you can swap back and forth, depending on your preference, but it is something you want to know about. Another thing you'll notice is that I was moving at sprinting speed. This is fine and creative, but if you're in survival, sprinting will take hunger and can deplete it fairly quickly, so it's often useful to turn the allow sprint off by setting it to false. Now, if I run that same command, you'll notice that I walk at a much slower pace. And in fact, if I set allow sprint to true, you'll notice that I start running. And then back again. This is very useful in order to prevent use of your hunger bar in survival. There's a couple other options as well. Allow break would prevent you from breaking blocks while pathfinding to a goal, which can be useful if you are, say, inside of a building you don't want to pretend you're the Kool-Aid Man in, or don't want to dig underneath a fence line or something similar. You can turn this off while pathfinding. It's very useful. Now, We've talked a lot about pathfinding, but how do we actually do it? Well, in order to go somewhere, you have to tell the Baritone mod where you want to go, and there's a large amount of ways to do this, but we'll cover the easiest. The most naive and simple is using the goal command, partnered with a set of coordinates that you wish to go to. For instance, I'm going to use my little point A here, and I'm going to set goal to 78, 76, I believe that says, and 184, if I remember right. And you'll see this little glowing box. That's where I've now told Baritone I want the path to. But how do we actually get it to path us to that location? Well, we type in path, and it will walk us to our goal and delete the goal. So now if I were to type path again, it doesn't work because there's nowhere to path to. So the goal command works once and is deleted once you reach it. So how do we go ahead and enter it for a little bit easier, right? This works for long distances, but isn't the most useful, especially if you don't know exactly where you want to go and you don't want to have to look up the coordinates of every spot. So what if there was an easier way? Well, for stuff that's within your sight, click is another really good option. Now it does have a separate use, which we'll cover later, but for right now, if we type in click, you'll notice that I have my mouse cursor, and more importantly, that I can move the mouse cursor all over the screen without my view moving. If I right-click in a given location, that automatically sets a goal and tells Baritone to path us to it, which is very handy. So that's great for finding positions that you can see or going to a location once. But what if I want to record a location and be able to return to there as many times as I like? Well, that involves the Baritone Waypoint system, and the easiest way to start using it is with the home and set home commands. Set home and home are pretty self-explanatory. We do set home once, and it sets a location for our home at our feet. Then we can go wherever else we want to go in the world, and we type in home, and Baritone will automatically path us back to our set home location. And even though the goal is gone, we can type home as many times as we wish, and it will always bring us back to this location. That's pretty useful. But what if we run the set home command again? Well, it seems to have worked. It now sets us over here, but what if we run the home command a second time? Because what happened to our waypoint over here? Well, let's find out. Oh, this is different. Now we have two waypoints labeled home, and most importantly, it hasn't automatically just picked one and taken us to it. This is the waypoints list, and specifically it's the waypoints of the home tag that are generated every time we use the set home command. So now we can click it, and it'll pick which one we want to go to, which is pretty handy. But what if I didn't want to set one of these? What if I wanted to delete one of these or go to a different waypoint altogether? Well, that's going to involve command WP for waypoint list, and that's going to give us every single waypoint we have in the game. And this includes a bunch of different things, not just our home waypoints that we've already set, but user-defined waypoints, as well as death points, and though I don't have any here, bed points, basically points that are saved when I sleep in beds. Anytime you want to make a waypoint, you're going to be either setting home with the home command, or using a user-defined waypoint that we'll talk about in just a minute. But we can select both of our home waypoints, and that'll bring up this menu. Instead of automatically pathing, we can delete it, we can set it as our goal, as we were doing manually before, we can recreate it, or we can return to the list. For now, I'm going to delete both of my home positions. And then, if we run the WP list command again, you'll notice I don't have any more homes saved. Now what about these death points? What if I want to delete both of them at once? Well, you can do that. You can type in WP clear, and then it sorts by tag. And again, the tags are bed, death, user, and home. So I can type in death, and it will delete both of my death waypoints. So now all I have are two user-defined waypoints called red and green, and I bet you'll never be able to guess where those are. So let's go check and see how I set those up. Here at the green waypoint, I have the command for that I ran in order to save this point, and I'll demonstrate it now. By deleting both, first I will delete both of these, just so we can start fresh. So, I have WP, again, for waypoint, S, or save, both will work. User defines the tag, and again, those tags are user, bed, home, and death, and then I can name it whatever I want, and in this case, I'm going to call it green. And I've just saved a new waypoint at my feet called green, and I can double check that by using WP list to check. The only waypoint I have now is green. Let's go set up the red one. Same process, but it's always handy to repeat ourselves a couple of times. So again, we're going to do WP, and I'm going to use S this time just to show you that both work. I'm going to use user for the tag and red. And I've now got two waypoints. If I go and check with WP list, you'll see that both of them exist once again. Now, I can either, or the easiest way to do this is to select the waypoints from the list, set them as your goal, and then use path. And Baritone will automatically find its way towards your selected waypoint. And that's great. I can use this from actually both. I can go from to green from here. I don't have to go anywhere else. I can set goal, and then path, and Baritone will automatically find its way over towards the green waypoint. And again, this will work regardless of the distance. 10 blocks or 10,000, it doesn't matter. One thing to note, though, for long-distance travel, is that while Baritone is very capable, it's not very smart. Here, in my test world, it's always daytime, but in your survival worlds, it's going to be nighttime sometimes, or the world may not be well lit up. In those cases, you're going to be running past mobs, and while Baritone is very good at finding its way from point A to point B, regardless of distance, it is not very good at avoiding mobs. So if you're, say, using this to travel across the world to a distant waypoint, be aware that Baritone may run you straight into a creeper, and you will have a bad time. So it is important to at least be aware of that, even if you're not going to be present for the whole journey. Just like an autopilot on an airplane, you can set it, and it does lessen your burden. You still want the pilot to be in the cockpit if you want to make sure you're going to be safe. So, what's this next setup here? Well, you'll notice that I have another waypoint set up, but there's a gap. I can't just walk there uninterrupted. So, let's set up another waypoint here. And it looks like I didn't make this one glow, but do waypoint, save, oh my god, there we go, user, and white. So I've now got another waypoint here. But what happens, and I will give myself some building blocks because that is going to be necessary. I don't actually think this will work without it, at least not yet. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to type in waypoint list again. We're going to select our white waypoint and tell Baritone to go to it. Now, because I can't get there, it's going to jump me up, and now I've gotten there. No big deal. But what if I wanted to go ahead and not build up here? What if I want to tell Baritone to try to jump this gap? Well, no matter how many times I do that, it's not going to, because there's a setting currently preventing it from doing that, and that is allow parkour, basically allowing it to jump. So if I come in here, and I set allow parkour to true, and I can now go ahead and type in, come in and find this there, set it to the goal. Now if I type path, instead of trying to build up to it, it's just going to jump the gap. Now it did have to build one additional block in order to be able to bridge the distance with a jump, but it did manage to jump it. There's one additional setting that is interesting, but I do want you to at least say it, or see it, which is allow parkour place. And it is what it sounds like. You will, on these longer jumps, instead of placing a block here, you will jump in the midair and place the block that you're going to land on instead. And just for giggles, let's show you that one. Allow parkour place. Not jump. There we go. So now, if I go in and select our waypoint, instead of placing the block before I've jumped, it will place it where I'm going to land. It's a neat little setting. It can be dangerous. Again, this is not guaranteed to work. It is merely an AI that is going to attempt to make the jump, so it is possible for it to fail. The safest possible options are to have both of these turned off, but I did want to show you them that it is possible. Now, that's pretty much it for pathfinding, at least what we're going to cover today. But let's get to the thing that you're probably most interested to see, which is how to make this thing dig for you. There's two general ways you're going to be able to do it, and the most simple is the tunnel command. Now, if you just run tunnel by itself, it will tunnel in the direction you're in a 1x2 space forever, as long as you go, until you press it and press cancel or tell it to stop. But we can limit what it does by specifying the exact sizes of the tunnel we want it to dig. By default, you want 2x1, so 2 tall, 1 wide. And then I have this as 8 blocks, and I'm starting here, so it's 9 blocks total. So if I were to type tunnel 219, you'll see that I dig out this space, and it stops after it's got the amount it needs. Now this, you've probably noticed, is pretty useful for branch mining. You can dig out your branches automatically, which is pretty great. But what if you want to dig the main tunnel, or have something a little bit different? Well, we can do that too, by using the same command, tunnel, but with a different sized tunnel space. So we do tunnel, 2 high, 3 wide, 9 deep. And you'll notice that it doesn't exactly mine in the way that a person would, but it's pretty close. It tends to favor grabbing every block within its range before moving, so it can feel a little weird, but it gets the same results. And the size you're able to tunnel is not limited. You could make a tunnel that is 1,000 by 1,000 if you really want it, though I would not recommend it. Now, you may notice that while this is great for doing things at your feet, the other kind of digging we'll probably want to do is to dig a big hole below us. And tunnels measure their height from your feet up. So if you were to dig, say, a tunnel 64 tall, it would try to dig 64 up in the air, which means you'd have to go all the way down 64 blocks, and then you dig out your first layer and not be able to jump up or dig a pillar up in order to do it. It's pretty inefficient. Perhaps we can find another way to dig. And that other way to dig is by using the select commands. Now, whereas tunnel digs from our feet up, the selection command can be used to draw a box somewhere in the world and then to clear that box out, which is how we actually dig out a hole. The easiest method is by setting 2 points with cell 1 and 2, which stands for select point 1 and select point 2. So let's look. So we do cell 1, that sets this point here at my feet, and then I do cell 2, which sets this point at my feet. And with both points set, we get a box using both points as their corners. Now that's pretty nice. It gets us a nice flat place, but I want to dig down. How do I make this box down into the earth without having to dig all the way down there myself? Wasn't that the problem with tunnel? Well, that's where the expansion command comes in. And there's a couple of parts to this one, but it's pretty simple. So it's the cell for select command again, expand, and then there's this word all. And all that means is that we're selecting all of the selections we have. It is possible to make more than one, but typically speaking, you're not going to run into that unless you're doing something that isn't covered in this tutorial. So we're going to use the all command in order to make sure that all of our selections gets chosen for the command. The direction we want to expand in, so it's up, down, or any of the 4 cardinal directions, east, west, north, all that. And then the amount that we'd like to expand. So to show you how this works, we type cell, expand, A or all, again, just like with save, it can be S or save, it can be A or all. And then we're going to type our direction, in this case, down. And I want to type 5 blocks, and watch what happens to our selection. You'll see that it's expanded downwards, 5 blocks. And in fact, I'd like to go 1 more. And there we go. So now it's all the way down here. So we're ready to go. But I would like to show you one more method of selecting a box and also how to clear them. So let's say you've already dug this out, or you've decided you want to make it a different size. How do you clear your selection? Well, it's pretty simple. We do cell, clear. And it's just that easy. But I did mention there's another way to draw a selection box, and in fact at the very beginning of the tutorial I mentioned the click command has another use. Where before we were using right click, well, left click has a different purpose. So if we go and do click again, you'll see I get that same setup where I have my mouse and the selection box, but instead of right-clicking to go to a location, I'm going to left-click and drag to draw out my selection box. Also, before I realized I didn't say how to get out of this mode, you press the escape key, and it will put you back in control of your character. And then we can expand our box, just as we did the first time, with cell, expand, all, down, and 6. And that will give us the same result as we had before. But how do we actually go ahead and dig this out? Well, in order to do that, we're going to want to use the command cell CA, or clear all. And the moment I hit this, my character is going to immediately start digging. And just as I said with the tunnel command, there isn't a size limit for this. While I've chosen a relatively small area here, it is possible to dig a 100 by 100 or even a 1000 by 1000 hole, should you really choose to do so. However, I wouldn't recommend making it that large, but you could if you wish. Now, in creative mode, I won't go for a tool, but it is still usable in survival. You will just need to have a pickaxe and shovel somewhere on your toolbar or in your inventory, and Baritone will pull them out and switch between them as needed. I don't know if it respects your durability limits, but just be aware that it may end up breaking said tools if it has to. Another important thing to remember is that it will always dig out the blocks you've told it to, but it may dig out additional blocks if it determines it has to go around a particular portion, and it can only do that by stepping outside of the selection. So just because something isn't inside the selection doesn't mean Baritone won't break it. Again, Baritone is very capable, but it is not very smart. So, if this is the 2 ways to dig large holes, there's one other capability that Baritone has that you're probably very interested in, and is the reason that most servers, at least public ones, have banned its use. And that is because, just like players, we don't just want to dig big holes, we want to go find resources. Which brings us to the mine command. And it's exactly what it sounds like. If I were to type mine and then diamond ore with an underscore, or coal ore or redstone ore or whatever, or even just stone or diorite, it will go ahead and search all of the available chunks that it searches in, which is, I think, a couple of chunks out from the player, and it will go ahead and find the nearest example of that block, head to it, mine it, and keep mining until you tell it to stop. It can accept multiple different kinds of inputs, so I can look for diamond ore, and I can look for iron ore at the same time, and it will go ahead and mine for both of them within a given area. But it will use X-ray to do it, because again, Baritone has a mathematical understanding of the Minecraft world, and so it can see every single block near you, but that isn't always what we want to do. And so if you want to do something a little more, we'll say, legit feeling, you can use the command legit mine, which is a setting we can turn on and off. So if I go ahead and I turn legit mine to true, you'll see that it has a setting, and I've set it to true from false. What that will do is it'll prevent Baritone from being able to see through walls. It will only consider ores that are exposed to the air, and it will also go ahead and try to branch mine at a given level, which you set with the setting legit mine Y level. So we'll do that now. Legit mine Y level, and I'm going to choose -50. The old value, you can see I had it set to 59. I believe it's set to that by default, but we're going to go to -50 for this one. And because I have legit mine turned on, it's going to probably dig me down that cave over there and get me down to the level I want to be at, and then start mining. Okay, so let's go ahead and type in mine. And we'll look for, I happen to know that it's deep slate diamond ore at that level. So we're going to put that in there. And it will go ahead, pick a direction. Now I have free look turned back on as well as sprinting because I want this to be a little faster. But with legit mining turned on, it's only going to look at blocks that are exposed. So it isn't always going to be as effective. It can often error out or not be able to find stuff. You can see like it's continuously trying to find new ways to get around. But if I turn legit mine off, and then, yeah, so now you can see that I have X-ray vision of all of the deep slate diamond ore in the world, as does Baritone. So it's going to go ahead and try to find a direct path down to the nearest block. And this green block here is going to be it placing a block. I'm not 100% sure what it's going to try and do. Now it will fall into water by default, so I think it's up to like 26 blocks. So by default it will go ahead and just drop straight through the world. Yeah, so we are going to go ahead and get down to where that diamond ore is. We're starting to get close. And there, see, it's found some. And this one was exposed, but with legit mining turned off, they don't have to be. It will find just every piece of ore in the area until I tell it to turn off. And it is possible for this thing to find stacks and stacks of ore, no problem, every hour. And again, you can tell us to look for like iron ore as well as diamond. It really is up to you how much you want it to look for at any given time. And you can saw for a second there I was a little bit on fire, so it's not 100% perfect. Again, I wouldn't leave this thing to just run by itself continuously, but it is very useful for this. Now, I still prefer to strip mine, but I did want to at least showcase this feature. Again, never use this on a public server with, well, just don't use this on a public server for one, but especially not with legit mine setting turned off, because you will almost certainly get banned from that server for what I hope are obvious reasons. But anyway, this will go until I tell it to cancel, which I'm going to do now. And there is one final command, we'll see if this works, because it doesn't always, is you can tell it to go to the surface, and it will navigate its way back up to the top of the world. So if you're at the bottom of a cave, can't find your way out, this is a pretty useful thing, because it will just go ahead and navigate its way all the way back up to the surface level. But anyway, we'll do a jump cut here until it's there, because it's got a long way to go. So I will see you on the surface. So yeah, that is Baritone and its most common commands and the ways to use them. So I hope this has been informative and not too difficult to follow along with, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for watching.